The new K-drama Mask Girl has currently topped Netflix's weekly non-English TV show ranking and landed in the top 10 in 72 countries around the world during the second week of its release. It explores themes of loneliness in the modern age, lookism, family love and revenge, and it's quite dark, but I thought it was really good, so I'm gonna do a review on it. And this is your warning now that there are spoilers in this video, so if you haven't watched, click off now and let's get into it. Mask Girl is based on a webtoon of the same name, and it follows the story of Momi, who has had an inferiority complex about her looks since she was young and always dreamed about being famous and admired, but she is in fact an ordinary office worker that gets dismissed as ugly. Her mom literally says to her when she's a kid, "You want to be a singer with a face like that? Get real." She is mean and she's savage, and her mom generally just doesn't seem like a very warm, nice person, and this goes on throughout the whole show, and it is kind of significant later on, but we'll get to that. So Momi, she lives a very mundane office life, but after she finishes work, she actually becomes a whole different person by donning a mask and putting on a wig and performing as Mask Girl on a streaming platform. She has an attractive figure and wears little dresses and dances and often performs suggestive acts on these streams, such as pouring milk all over herself. So the lonely men who are watching these kind of streams develop a parasocial relationship with her and fantasize over her. And so she receives love and attention from these men, which is something she just doesn't receive in her actual real life. But her double life gets revealed by one of her most loyal fans, Nam. He's rather similar to Mask Girl in the sense that he was also bullied about his looks when he was young, and it led him to retreat and just live like a very lonely, sheltered life. He has dolls in his house, he's pleasuring himself to Japanese anime, and he's basically what society would deem as a loser or an incel. But little do these two know though that they actually work in the same office. Since Nam is socially awkward and can't really look at people in the eyes, especially women, he has a habit of looking down at their hands when he's speaking to them, and he notices one day that the hands and the nails of Momi matches the hands and the nails of Mask Girl, and he realizes that they're the same person, and his obsession with Mask Girl just grows even more, and he begins having fantasies about confessing his love to her and also her reciprocating that love back to him. But both of their lives take a downturn when Mask Girl meets up with a horny fan who tries to force himself onto her in a motel, but then he slips and bangs his head against the counter and gets knocked out. Momi thinks that this guy is dead because he's unconscious and he's bleeding everywhere also, and Nam, who was stalking them, he comes in, he sees what's happened and offers to help dispose of the body because he's nice. But the guy in fact is not dead, of course, and he starts to wake up, and Nam, he freaks out and he basically starts unaliving him in a frenzied panic. This whole incident obviously takes a toll on Momi. She can't deal with what happened and she decides to leave her job and leave town. But Nam comes to her place and asks her not to go. She then accuses him of being like all the other creepy dudes, and he gets angry and he pushes her onto the bed and he forces himself onto her. And it's also revealed here that Momi has had plastic surgery on her face to transform herself into a different person. She ends up unaliving Nam and basically goes on the run for 2 years with the whole country chasing after her. Meanwhile, Kim Kyung-ja is the mother of Nam and she raised her son as a single parent. Although she wasn't particularly nice to her son when he was alive, after she finds out that Mask Girl has murdered him, she goes on a relentless revenge hunt to find her. And she is one determined lady. She takes classes on how to use the computer, she learns internet slang and lingo, what the youngsters are using, goes to a fortune teller to ask for directions, and eventually ends up successfully finding Momi, but then she gets knocked out by her club friend Chune, and ultimately Momi ends up putting Kyung-ja in a car and pushing the car into the river. From that point, the whole country knows her as Mask Girl, the serial killer, and she goes on the run but eventually gets caught by police, and she has her fantasy spotlight moment where all the cameras are just pointing at her, everyone's super interested in her, although obviously this was not the way she imagined she would be famous. Momi gets sentenced to life in prison. But before that, from that fateful night when Nam forced himself onto her, she actually ended up becoming knocked up by him, and she gives birth to a daughter named Mimo, and she ends up leaving Mimo on the doorstep of her mother and asks her to take care of the baby and leaves. But Kyung-ja has miraculously survived the car drowning and plots her revenge to get back at Momi, but realizes that she's now locked up in prison. She decides that the next best thing to do would be to ruin her daughter Mimo's life, just like how Mask Girl ruined her son's life. Kyung-ja also ends up getting plastic surgery and becomes a friendly, neighborhood grandma figure to young Mimo, which is in stark contrast to her actual real grandmother, who's very stern and cold and doesn't give any affection. Kyungja actually ends up becoming the only person Mimo trusts in her world. Kyungja then comes to prison and tells Momi that she's going to kill her daughter. Momi freaks out, she tells everybody but no one believes her, so she finds a way to escape out of the prison by offering her kidney to the daughter of an influential inmate who is tied with the prison wardens. On the day of the surgery, Momi escapes by jumping out of the window and drives off to save her daughter. Meanwhile, Kyungja has drugged Mimo and plans to film her death so she can finally end her 15-year revenge to Mask Girl. But Mimo's grandmother and her best friend Yechun have figured out that this old lady might cause serious harm to Mimo, and thus the final climax of the show begins. Mimo wakes up from her drugged state and just cannot understand why this kind old lady suddenly wants to kill her, because she's totally unaware of the whole backstory with her son and Mask Girl. She doesn't know any of this. Mimo's grandmother arrives and gets unalived by Kyungja with a pair of scissors, but before she passes away, she says a final "I'm sorry" to her granddaughter. So this kind of did show that she had some sort of love for her granddaughter and maybe for her own daughter too. But then Momi, Mask Girl, arrives to the scene and gets the two girls to escape while Kyungja and Momi fight to the death in the cellar. And Momi comes out as victorious. She comes outside, but the police have all arrived and have surrounded the house to come and arrest her. Amazingly, Kyungja has managed to survive again and comes out to take one final shot at Mimo despite all the police's warnings. And Momi ends up throwing herself in front of her daughter to take the bullet, and Kyungja gets shot by police straight away and dies. So Mimo ends up living with her best friend Yechun and her family, and she says she finds that she no longer hates people. All of the darkness within herself is gone, and she no longer has nightmares about her mother either. The final sacrifice that Momi showed her at the end was what showed her a mother's maternal love, and I guess that healed her. The series ends with Mimo watching her mother's childhood videos and crying over them. Okay, so overall thoughts. I enjoyed it very much, and I think my favorite were the first 2 episodes. The first half was better for me than the second half. I thought the Onam character played by actor An Jae-hong was so convincing. Apparently he put on 10 kilograms for the role. He also had a stuffed belly. He also had a wig and had makeup on to make him look way less attractive. And the first 2 episodes were mainly about the issue of lookism and how people treat you based on your appearance. There are some plot points where I thought it was just like slightly unrealistic at times. Like just how many times Kyungja comes back to life. She's like an unbeatable zombie. And at the end, I really was expecting Mask Girl to reveal to Kyungja like, hey, this is your actual granddaughter. Your son knocked me up. I really thought that was coming, and I thought Kyungja would have an existential crisis and that she would just stop what she's doing. But that did not end up happening, and it kind of made for a frustrating ending in my opinion. Another plot point that I thought was a bit weird. I don't see how it's possible that Onam is the father of the child, as way more than 9 months must have passed since that night, and after she recovered from her plastic surgery and then she starts working in the club, she becomes the ace of the club, and then she goes on that run with her friend Chune, and then that's when she reveals like, oh, I'm pregnant. I feel like she would have already started showing that she's pregnant, so I don't really see how that's possible, but okay. I feel like the final episode especially really touches on the maternal love that mothers have for their children. So Kyungja, she wasn't particularly nice to her son when he was alive. She was actually kind of mean to him, always comparing him to other men. She would berate and nag him and forgot his birthday. But after he died, she acted like her son was an absolute saint who has no faults. She kind of went on this psychotic revenge hunt, and she even wants to kill a child just to get her revenge. It seemed a little bit extreme, but I did like how each episode was laid out from a different character's perspective, and each episode ended on a hook, so it like really just makes you watch the next one. The 3 actresses that all played Momi, Mask Girl, were all great, I thought, and especially the first one, the ugly Mask Girl. That was her first ever acting role, so I thought she did a really good job. There are no news yet about season 2, but considering how successful this is doing, I wouldn't be surprised if season 2 was on the cards, and probably if it continues then we'll follow the story of her daughter. We would hope towards the end of watching this season, we would hope that she's healed and she's gonna be fine, and we hope that the generational trauma doesn't continue, but let's see if that's the case in season 2. So yeah, this series, first half was better for me. It explores themes of loneliness, bullying, office politics, the perils of live streaming and social media, and just unconditional parental love. I think that was a big theme that I got towards the end. But yeah, have you guys watched it? Let's talk down in the comments. What did you think? Don't forget to turn on the bell notification so you don't miss out on new videos, and see you in the next video. Bye!